She couldn't understand why she couldn't see the photo immediately. The film in her hands was still warm from recent use, and the air carried the scent of developer, the familiar aroma of a darkroom that meant hours of waiting. This childish question stumped a man who held 535 patents, more than Thomas Edison had at the same age. Edwin Land, creator of polarizing filters who solved problems in military optics, couldn't explain to his 3-year-old daughter why the magic of photography required such a long wait. Her now collided with the later of an entire industry. Yet this naive question proved more challenging than all the technical problems he solved daily. Why could a man who controlled light not tame time? The chemistry of photography worked like a slow train, but he needed a photon. This promise, to see the photo immediately, seemed to violate all the laws of chemistry. Traditional photography required patience, developer, fixer, washing. But the inventor's stubbornness, fueled by a child's impatience, drove him to seek solutions where others saw only an insurmountable wall. History would prove that the greatest technological breakthroughs are often born not in laboratories, but from a child's why. The answer lay not in optics, but in chemistry that everyone considered too slow for instant magic. It took Edwin Land just 3 hours to sketch the concept for a camera that broke all the rules of photographic chemistry. But the journey from that idea to a working prototype took 5 long years, filled with experimental struggles. In 3 hours he understood how to cheat time, but implementing it required 1,825 days of laboratory battles. The genius of the concept lay in its apparent simplicity. 2 chemical components had to work in perfect synchrony, creating an image in seconds rather than hours. But traditional photographic chemistry was too slow and fragile for such a breakthrough. Each experiment failed upon contact with air, and the reagents refused to cooperate in real-world conditions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place, Land's own polarization research. He discovered that the chemical processes he studied for controlling light could be repurposed to control development time. But this chemical battle led to an even more complex challenge: how to package laboratory magic into a pocket-sized format. In the laboratory where the miracle was born, glass flasks gently chimed from the vibration of thermostats maintaining temperature to within half a degree Celsius. Here, the first prototypes worked flawlessly under ideal conditions, but failed when confronted with reality. Land's team created samples in complete isolation, protecting the fragile chemistry from the outside world. But the formula demanded not just precision, but speed. The chemical reaction had to complete within 60 seconds. The secret turned out to be temperature control, which became the key to future public triumph. This laboratory battle with chemistry set the stage for a demonstration that would change everything. The 2-component chemical pack seemed an elegant solution to an extremely complex problem. It worked like a pacemaker: the slightest malfunction, and the chemistry died. Users had to manually spread the chemicals across the photo, an awkward but functional process. Yet this primitive system cost more than the camera itself and remained vulnerable to human error. Each chemical pack was a miniature laboratory, containing the entire complexity of the photographic process within a few square centimeters. This cumbersome system, despite all its flaws, carried the seed of future perfection. It was this very complexity that bred the skepticism Land would have to overcome. Professional photographers laughed at the invention, calling it a toy for adults. The technology seemed too simple for serious photography. Could you trust a process that required manually smearing chemicals? A characteristic remark survives from the archives: the developer stain on your fingers became the mark of initiation into a new photographic religion. But Land understood. His invention wasn't competing with professionals. It was creating an entirely new reality. The first 60-second photos were blurry and imperfect, but they carried a revolution that had to face public testing. This skepticism would become fuel for an even greater breakthrough. Each failure in the laboratory brought the team closer to a discovery that would overturn all the rules of photography. The chemical magic that seemed impossible gradually took shape in glass flasks and precise temperature regimes. The next battle would be fought not in the lab, but in the minds of skeptics and on store shelves. Room 33 at the Hotel Warwick in Boston smelled not of science, but of life. the scent of a fresh chemical pack mixed with the aroma of hotel carpet and the cigarette smoke of skeptics. On February 21, 1947, Edwin Land chose to demonstrate his invention not in a sterile laboratory, but in a place where illusions are typically born and die. Journalists and professional photographers gathered in the room expecting to witness another failure. They arrived with prejudice. A technology requiring manual chemical spreading seemed like a scientific curiosity, not the future of photography. The atmosphere was thick with doubt. Land, without giving a long speech, simply took a photo. And the waiting began. 60 seconds that became the longest in the history of photography. The attendees' gazes were fixed on the white sheet, where an image slowly, almost reluctantly, began to emerge. The skepticism in the air began to melt, replaced by quiet astonishment. When the image developed completely, silence fell in the room, broken only by the click of another camera's shutter. This wasn't a failure, it was a triumph. The miracle born in a hotel room had proven itself. Now the challenge was to conquer not science, but the market. And the market responded. The first Polaroid Model 95 went on sale a year later, in 1948, priced at $89.75. For post-war America, this was a huge sum, equivalent to about $1,100 modern dollars, the price of a good smartphone for the privilege of seeing the moment. Analysts unanimously predicted failure, considering the device an expensive toy for wealthy eccentrics. But 900,000 cameras were sold in the first 5 years. People voted with their dollars for the magic of the moment, preferring it to the practicality of traditional photography. This financial success surprised the critics, but not Land. He immediately reinvested the proceeds not into dividends, but into research. This financial windfall allowed him to dream not just of a camera, but of a complete photographic revolution. Yet the professional community continued to resist. The minutes of Photographers Association meetings preserve characteristic remarks. One master declared, "This isn't photography, it's entertainment for amateurs." Their main argument was quality. Instant photos couldn't compete with the clean, refined prints produced in laboratories. They saw Polaroid as a threat to their craft, built on patience and skill. Land understood their conservatism but saw the situation differently. His technology wasn't creating competition. It was creating a fundamentally new reality of the photographic experience. This was a battle not for pixel quality, but for the very perception of time. While professionals argued about chemical purity, ordinary people were already creating their own history, instant and unique. This philosophical battle about the essence of photography would lead to the creation of a device that would change not just technology, but the culture of image perception. Early users encountered the technology's imperfections. Chemical stains on the photos weren't defects, but unique fingerprints of each specific process. Color could be unstable, contrast fluctuating. Each such failure became a valuable lesson for Land's team, which refined the formula day by day. But paradoxically, these shortcomings became their greatest virtues. Each Polaroid photo was a unique artifact, a physical object bearing the marks of its birth. This uniqueness, born from chemical randomness, created an emotional connection unattainable by standardized lab printing. This very feature would become the main weapon in the war against flawless but soulless digital perfection. But reaching that point required a long journey from primitive manual reagents spreading to fully automatic and reliable magic. The true revolution began not with a camera, but with an idea that seemed impossible, fully automatic instant photography that fit in your pocket. The SX70 was to be the quintessence of Land's dream, a device where the user simply pressed a button and all the chemical magic happened by itself. The task was Herculean, to eliminate manual intervention completely, hiding the most complex process inside an elegant body. But the chemistry of instant development, requiring precise temperature control and reagent synchronization, seemed physically impossible in a compact format. The solution came from a world where complexity had already become simple: aerospace technology. Polaroid engineers borrowed miniature motors and precision mechanics, creating a system capable of extruding and distributing chemical reagents with micron-level accuracy. This engineering victory, concealing years of chemical and mechanical struggles, opened the door to every pocket. When the SX70 finally appeared, it wasn't just a camera, but a masterpiece of engineering, where the most complex processes were packaged into a sleek, folding body. The SX70 presentation in 1972 wasn't just a product demonstration, but a true theatrical performance. Land personally demonstrated the miracle. After the shutter clicked, a white rectangle began to slowly emerge from the camera, and before the astonished audience's eyes, an image developed on it. This theater, however, hid years of engineering battles. Each emerging photo required the flawless operation of dozens of miniature components. But the result was worth it. The demonstration changed the very nature of the photographic act, turning magic from a laboratory ritual into an everyday wonder accessible to everyone. The success was staggering. By the mid-70s, 1 in 3 Americans owned a Polaroid. The camera became not just a device, but a symbol of technological optimism and instant gratification. But this mass triumph concealed an internal conflict between accessibility for millions and the claim to artistic value. Polaroid ceased to be merely a tool, transforming into a cultural phenomenon that inevitably carried the seed of a future crisis. It was at this moment that unexpected allies appeared for what seemed a purely consumer device. Artists. Andy Warhol, Lucas Samaras, Robert Rauschenberg began using Polaroid for serious art. Paradoxically, the technological limitations of instant photos, their unique texture, unpredictable colors, chemical artifacts, became artistic possibilities. This aesthetic revolution proved the magic of Polaroid lay not in technical perfection, but in the immediacy and uniqueness of each artifact. But this very uniqueness, which became both its salvation and its crisis, would soon collide with a new reality, the flawless but soulless world of digital pixels. But the world Polaroid created soon faced its own apocalyptic version, the digital revolution. It arrived not as a competitor, but as an entirely new universe where every photo became infinite and free. Digital cameras offered unlimited shots, instant deletion of failed attempts, and the possibility of endless copying without quality loss. Against this backdrop, Polaroid, with its expensive chemical cartridges and single, unchangeable result, seemed an anachronism. The paradox was that this very finitude became the analog print's greatest virtue. In a world of digital abundance where images became data streams, the physical Polaroid print transformed into a unique artifact. Each such photo was singular and irreplaceable. It couldn't be edited, perfectly duplicated, or deleted with a single click. This material uniqueness, born from chemical randomness, became both the brand's salvation and its sentence in the era of mass consumption. The philosophical battle between the unique artifact and the reproducible pixel was just gaining momentum. In 2001, the Polaroid Corporation declared bankruptcy. This event became a symbol of the definitive victory of digital technology. Analysts predicted the complete oblivion of instant photography as an obsolete medium. But something unexpected happened. Polaroid fans didn't give up. Around the world, underground communities of enthusiasts emerged, buying up remaining film at auctions, sharing secrets of manual chemistry, and continuing to shoot. Their devotion proved an astonishing fact. Land's technology had created not just a consumer product, but a deep cultural code tied to immediacy, materiality, and the emotional value of an image. This devotion became the quiet foundation for what seemed an impossible resurrection. The story of this resurrection began with a mission many considered hopeless. In 2008, a group of enthusiasts called the Impossible Project purchased the last Polaroid factory in the Netherlands. Their goal was titanic, to revive production of the unique chemical film. But they faced colossal difficulties. Original chemical formulas were partially lost, equipment was outdated, and key specialists had long since left the company. This mission seemed as impossible as Land's original challenge 50 years earlier. But it was in this apparent hopelessness that new magic began to be born, retracing the path of the original pioneer. The revival of Polaroid in a fully digital era seemed paradoxical. But a new generation, raised on digital images, unexpectedly discovered the charm of analog prints. For them, Polaroid became not just a tool for photography, but a conscious choice, an antidote to digital abundance, a way to slow down and create a unique physical object. This nostalgia for the material, for tactile experience, became the final chord in a story that began with a child's question about instant magic. This conscious choice in a world of infinite pixels proves that some things, born from human emotions, are too precious to disappear forever. Edwin Land's 535 patents, more than Thomas Edison in his most productive years. But none could compare in influence to the simple question from his 3-year-old daughter. When Land died in 1991, he witnessed neither the digital revolution nor the revival of his dream. The man who gave the world the instant departed into eternity, leaving behind a formal legacy of hundreds of patents and the living memory of millions of users. In his laboratory notes, there was no room for magic, only precise formulas, temperature regimes, and chemical equations. The scientist who believed only in the power of the scientific method tried to contain wonder within chemical reactions. But the paradox was that this rationalist to the core created one of the most magical technologies of the 20th century. By the time of his death, 1 in 3 Americans had already held the embodiment of his idea in their hands. These millions of moments proved stronger than any patent documentation. The true legacy of the great inventor is measured not by the number of patents, but by the depth of his influence on human perception of time. While corporate archives gathered dust, a yellowed Polaroid from the 70s still sits in a family album as material evidence of a vanished instant. This physical memory proved more durable than all official documents. Today, these photos have become not just photographs, but archaeological finds for museums of modern art. The technology is only a few decades old, yet it's already being collected as cultural artifacts. The rough surface, smelling of chemicals, which couldn't be scanned without losing that unique texture. Artists from Andy Warhol to Damien Hirst consciously choose this technology in a world of digital perfection. They became the heirs to Land's philosophy, a belief in the uniqueness of every moment. But the real revolution happened not in galleries, but in millions of family albums, where each photo is a physical object that cannot be edited or erased with one click. In an era of instant digital image sharing, people pay for the privilege of waiting 60 seconds. This conscious choice became a form of digital detox, a return to the material world. What is more valuable, a perfect digital copy or a single, albeit imperfect, material original? The characteristic whirring sound of an emerging photo lasted exactly 4.5 seconds, long enough to create a sense of magic, but not long enough for impatience. This sound became an auditory symbol of patience in a world obsessed with speed. True magic requires time to manifest itself. Technology created for speed found its true value precisely because of its slowness. This paradox explains the astonishing revival of analog photography in a fully digital era. It answered a fundamental human need for material proof of existence. Land said in a 1972 interview, "I wanted photography to be an extension of vision, not a surrogate for it." His words reveal the essence of the invention, not to replace reality, but to supplement it with physical evidence. The gesture of shaking a freshly developed photo became a universal ritual for accelerating the magic. But this gesture was an illusion. The chemical process had already completed inside. But people continued to do it, trying to speed up the wonder. This ritual symbolizes the eternal human attempt to tame time. The greatest scientific discoveries are born at the boundary of the rational and the irrational, when a child's belief in magic meets an adult's confidence in the power of reason. Land, a rationalist to the core, day after day sought the chemical formula for materializing the instant. His search was a dialogue between the physicist and the alchemist within one person. What began as a scientific experiment became part of pop culture and everyday magic. But the real breakthrough occurred not in the chemical formula, but in the change of human perception of time. Sometimes the answer to a child's question requires a genius's entire life. The scientist who denied magic gave the world one of the last true wonders. And this paradox, scientific complexity giving birth to childlike simplicity, forms the heart of Edwin Land's legacy. The air that day in 1943 smelled of the sea and childish curiosity, a mixture that proved stronger than any scientific skepticism. Little Jennifer Land reached for her father's camera with a question that overturned the entire logic of photography. Her "Why can't I see it now?" sounded like a challenge to an entire industry built on patience and delayed results. In this childish gesture lay an eternal truth. Great discoveries are often born from simplicity that doesn't know the word impossible. The scientist with 535 patents faced a paradox. He could control light and polarizing filters, but he couldn't explain to a 3-year-old why chemistry takes time. This moment became a collision of two universes, a child's why and an adult's how. But it was this very directness that turned an abstract scientific problem into a personal mission. The real magic lay not in the answer, but in the courage to ask the question. A child's hand reaching for a camera, and a scientist's hand beginning a sketch. This image became a symbol of the eternal connection between question and answer. How many great discoveries do we lose when we stop asking childish questions? The Polaroid paradox revealed itself over time. Technology created to capture a fleeting moment unexpectedly became a tool for preserving eternity. The physical development process became a metaphor for memory. The image emerged gradually, like a recollection gaining clarity over time. The white border around the image yellowed unevenly over time, creating a unique pattern that couldn't be faked. This material fragility reminded us of the value of every moment. In the digital era, when everything can be erased, people consciously chose a technology that created a unique, irreproducible artifact. This choice became a form of resistance to total reproducibility. What was created as a temporary solution turned out to be the most permanent. Sales of analog Polaroid cameras grew by 300% over the last 5 years. The digital generation was discovering the magic of the material. The digital native generation was discovering with surprise the tactile contact with a memory. In a world where everything can be canceled and redone, the irrevocability of a Polaroid photo became not a flaw, but a virtue. This finality reminded us of the value of every decision. The click of a shutter in the digital era acquired new meaning as the sound of a conscious choice, the moment when the virtual became material. The technology of the last century turned out to be the answer to the challenges of the future. On that first photo Land took of his daughter, the image developed with a slight greenish tint, a chemical defect that became part of the legend. This artifact reminded us that the most important discoveries are often born from imperfection. The story of Polaroid is not just the story of photography, but a parable about how simplicity conquers complexity. The most complex scientific breakthrough was born from the simplest question. This chain, from a child's why to an idea, from an idea to a technology, from a technology to a cultural phenomenon. But the real miracle lay in the first link of this chain. Polaroid taught us that an instant can last forever if it's authentic. That magic exists at the intersection of science and faith, that the most important answers are often hidden in the simplest questions. The old photo of Land with his daughter, taken on one of the first Polaroids, captured not just a moment, but the beginning of an entire era. This image reminds us that great stories often begin with something small. Sometimes, to change the world, it's enough to have the courage to ask, why? The scientist who denied magic gave the world one of the last true wonders. His laboratory notes, filled with chemical formulas, testified to a rational approach. But the result of his work became proof that the greatest discoveries are born at the boundary of the rational and the irrational. In a world of infinite digital copies, Polaroid remains a reminder of the value of the unique. Each photo is not just an image, but physical evidence of a moment that cannot be repeated or perfectly reproduced. This materiality in an era of the virtual became a form of quiet resistance, a conscious choice in favor of an imperfect but real reality. Scientific complexity giving birth to childlike simplicity. This paradox forms the heart of Edwin Land's legacy. His invention journeyed from a child's question to a cultural phenomenon, survived the digital revolution, and found new life in an era when instantaneity has become commonplace. But the main lesson of this story is that sometimes the simplest questions require the boldest answers.